The crumpled foreclosure, notice on the kitchen counter, looked innocent enough, just a piece of white paper with black type, but to Mark, it weighed 1,000 pounds. He stood in the dim light of the pre-dawn morning, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the tiny, drafty apartment, staring at the date highlighted in red. He had 30 days to come up with 3 months of back rent, or he and his 6-year-old daughter Lily would be on the street. Mark rubbed his eyes, feeling the grit of exhaustion that sleep never seemed to wash away. He looked at his hands, calloused and scarred from years of construction work, hands that had built skyscraper and luxury condos for other people, yet couldn't seem to hold on to a roof for his own little girl. He opened the fridge, the light flickering, and stared at the contents: half a jar of mayonnaise, a carton of milk that expired yesterday, and 4 slices of bread. He made a choice then. The same choice he made every morning. He took the last 2 slices of ham and the cheese to make a sandwich for Lily's school lunch, packing it with a juice box and a handwritten note with a smiley face. For himself, he took the 2 heels of the bread loaf, slathered them with a thin layer of mayonnaise, and wrapped them in a napkin. That was lunch. That was fuel for 10 hours of hauling concrete. It wasn't enough, but it had to be. Before we dive deeper into Mark's journey, if you believe that kindness is the greatest currency we have, and that good deeds eventually come back around, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs hope today. Your support helps us share more powerful stories of humanity and second chances. The morning air was biting, a bitter wind that cut through Mark's threadbare canvas jacket as he walked the 12 blocks to the construction site. He couldn't afford the gas for his truck, which sat dead in the apartment parking lot, a silent monument to better days. As he walked, his mind replayed the memories of his late wife, Sarah. She had been the optimist, the one who found rainbows in oil slicks. Since cancer took her 2 years ago, the color had drained from Mark's world, leaving only the gray of concrete and the black of ink on overdue bills. He walked with his head down, fighting the wind and the gnawing emptiness in his stomach. He arrived at the site, a massive glass and steel tower rising in the center of the finance district, a place where money flowed like water, invisible and unreachable to men like him. The foreman, a man named Miller with a voice like gravel, was already barking orders. Mark clocked in and got to work, his muscles screaming in protest as he began hauling bags of cement. By noon, Mark was trembling. It was a physical reaction to the caloric deficit and the intense labor. The lunch whistle blew, a shrill sound that echoed off the steel beams, and the crew scattered. Most men headed to the food trucks lined up on the street, the smell of grilling burgers and tacos wafting up like a cruel taunt. Mark grabbed his water bottle and his napkin-wrapped bread heels and walked away from the crew. He usually ate in a secluded corner of the site to hide his meager meal, but today the dust was choking him. He needed air. He walked across the street to a small city park, a patch of green surrounded by the towering giants of industry. He found a bench near a dried-up fountain and sat down, his bones settling with a heavy ache. He unwrapped the bread, looking at it with a mixture of gratitude and despair. It was dry, pathetic, but it was food. Just as he was about to take a bite, a shadow fell over him. Mark looked up to see an old man standing there. The man was a heartbreaking sight. He wore a coat that was more holes than fabric, stained with the grime of the city. His beard was matted and gray, and his shoes were held together with duct tape. But it was his eyes that caught Mark off guard. They weren't glazed over or aggressive. They were piercing, blue, and incredibly weary. The man didn't ask for money. He didn't hold out a cup. He just stared at the bread in Mark's hand, his throat bobbing in a swallow that spoke of profound hunger. Mark paused. He looked at the bread, his energy, his survival for the afternoon, and then he looked at the old man. He thought of Lily. He thought of how terrified he would be if she were ever cold and hungry with no one to help. He thought of Sarah, who used to say that you have 2 hands, one to help yourself and one to help others. Mark didn't say a word. He didn't preach or look down on the man. He simply broke the bread in half. He hesitated for a split second. His stomach roared in protest, but he pushed the feeling down. He handed the larger half to the old man. The man's hands shook as he took it. He didn't eat it immediately. He looked at Mark, really looked at him, as if trying to memorize his face. He sat down on the other end of the bench. They ate in silence for a moment. 2 men from opposite ends of existence, sharing a meal that wouldn't feed a bird. Mark finished his portion in 2 bites and drank deeply from his water bottle to trick his stomach into feeling full. He looked over at the stranger. "Rough day?" Mark asked, his voice raspy. The old man chewed slowly, savoring the stale bread. Rough life, the man replied, his voice surprisingly clear and articulate. You. Mark let out a dry, humorless chuckle. You could say that, trying to keep a roof over my little girl's head. It's a losing battle, looks like. The old man nodded, wiping crumbs from his beard. Children are a blessing, they are the anchor. Mark smiled, reaching for his wallet, to pull out a battered photo of Lily. That's my Lily. She's 6. She wants to be an astronaut. Says she wants to go to the moon because rent is free there. The old man leaned in, looking at the photo with genuine interest. A small smile touched his lips. She has your eyes. You're a good father, sharing your meal when you clearly don't have enough for yourself. Mark shrugged, embarrassed. We're all just trying to get by, Pop. Nobody makes it alone. I've been close to where you are. Might be there soon myself, if things don't turn around. The old man looked at the skyscraper Mark had been working on. You build the towers, but you cannot enter them. It is a strange world we have made. Mark sighed, standing up as the whistle blew in the distance. Yeah, well, keeps the rain off someone, I guess. Take care of yourself, old timer. Mark reached into his pocket. He had a $5 bill, his emergency fund, intended for gas if he could ever fix the truck. He crumpled it and pressed it into the old man's hand. Get something hot to drink. It's going to freeze tonight. Mark walked back to the site, his stomach still empty, but his heart strangely lighter. However, reality has a way of crushing moments of grace. When Mark arrived back at the foreman's station, Miller was waiting with a clipboard and a grim expression. Mark, Miller said, not making eye contact, I'm sorry. The developers are cutting costs. They want the crew trimmed by 20% effective immediately. Last in, first out. Mark felt the blood drain from his face. The noise of the city faded into a dull roar. Miller, you can't. I have a foreclosure notice. I have a daughter. Miller shook his head, looking pained but resolute. It's not my call, Mark. Here's your pay for the week. I put in a good word for you at the union hall, but work is slow everywhere. Mark took the envelope, his hands trembling. He had given away his lunch, his last $5, and now he had given away his future. He walked home in a daze, the cold finally penetrating his bones. The next 3 days were a blur of desperation. Mark applied for everything: dishwasher, janitor, night watchman, but the answer was always the same: no vacancies, or he was overqualified for manual labor, but underqualified for management. The foreclosure clock was ticking. He sat at his kitchen table, head in his hands, listening to Lily sleep in the next room. He felt like a failure, a total, absolute failure. He had tried to be a good man, tried to work hard, tried to be kind, and for what? To end up on the street. He remembered the old man in the park. He wondered if the man was warm tonight. The thought brought a bitter taste to his mouth. Being kind hadn't saved him. It had just left him $5 poorer. On the 4th day, a letter arrived. It wasn't a bill. It was a heavy, cream-colored envelope with a gold embossment, Henderson Global Enterprises. Mark frowned. That was the company that owned the building he had been fired from. He opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed on expensive linen stock. Dear Mr. Reynolds, you are requested to appear for an interview regarding the position of logistics manager at our headquarters. Please present this letter at the reception desk at 10 a.m. on Friday. Mark stared at it. Logistics manager. He hadn't applied for that. He didn't even have a resume for that. It had to be a mistake. A cruel clerical error, but he was desperate. Even if it was a mistake, maybe he could beg for a janitorial job while he was there. Mark put on his only suit, the one he had worn to Sarah's funeral. It was a little tight in the shoulders and smelled faintly of mothballs, but he pressed it until the lines were sharp. He polished his work boots until they shone as best they could. He kissed Lily goodbye, telling her daddy had a big meeting, and walked the long distance to the city center. He stood before the completed tower, the glass reflecting the clouds, and felt entirely inadequate. He walked into the lobby, a cavern of marble and light. The receptionist, a woman with glasses and a sharp look, took his letter. Her eyebrows shot up. Mr. Reynolds? Yes, you are expected. Top floor. The executive suite. Mark rode the elevator up, his ears popping as the numbers climbed. 40, 50, 60. The doors opened onto a plush carpet. that felt deeper than his mattress. A young assistant guided him down a hallway lined with modern art that cost more than Mark would earn in 10 lifetimes. They stopped at a massive mahogany door. "Mr. Henderson is waiting for you," the assistant said. Mark took a deep breath. He expected to see a slick corporate shark. He opened the door and walked in. The office was panoramic, offering a view of the entire city. Standing by the window, with his back turned, was a man in a charcoal gray suit that fit perfectly. "Mr. Reynolds," the man said. The voice. Mark knew that voice. It was clear, articulate, and familiar. The man turned around. Mark stopped dead in his tracks. He blinked, trying to reconcile the image before him. The man was clean-shaven, his hair trimmed in silver, his skin healthy. But the eyes, those piercing blue eyes, were unmistakable. It was the beggar. The man from the park. The man who had eaten his stale bread crusts. "You," Mark whispered, gripping the back of a chair for support. "You're the— but I don't understand." The man smiled, and it was the same warm smile from the bench. "Please, sit down, Mark. I am Arthur Henderson, CEO of this company." Mark sat, his legs giving out. "But the park, the clothes, the hunger, I don't get it. Was it a joke? A TV show?" Arthur shook his head slowly, his expression serious. "No joke, Mark. You see, I built this company from nothing. I spent 40 years fighting, clawing, negotiating. I became very rich and very powerful. But recently, I began to feel that I had lost something vital. I was surrounded by people who said yes to everything I said, people who wanted my money, my influence. I couldn't tell who was real anymore. I couldn't remember what it felt like to be human, to be vulnerable." Arthur walked over to his desk and picked up a small object. It was the crumpled $5 bill Mark had given him. He smoothed it out on the polished wood. "So," Arthur continued, "once a year for 1 week I leave my life. I go out into the city with nothing. No ID, no credit cards, no phone. I become invisible. I want to see the world as it is, not as my boardroom reports say it is. I want to see if humanity still exists in a city of steel." He looked Mark in the eye. "For 3 days, Mark, I sat on that bench. Hundreds of people walked by. Men in suits worth thousands of dollars stepped over me. People I employ ignored me. Teenagers laughed at me. I was invisible. Until you." Tears pricked Mark's eyes. He felt a lump in his throat so large he couldn't speak. "You were hungry," Arthur said softly. "I saw your hand shake. I saw you looking at that sandwich like it was gold. And yet, when you saw me a dirty, useless old man, you didn't just give me scraps. You broke your own sustenance in half. You sat with me. You treated me like a man, not a nuisance. You spoke of your daughter with such love. And then, when you left, you gave me your last $5. I had my security team trailing me, Mark. I know you were fired that afternoon. I know about the foreclosure." Arthur slid a folder across the desk. Mark opened it. Inside wasn't just a job offer. It was a deed to a house, a modest, beautiful house in a good school district, fully paid for. And underneath that, a college trust fund document for Lily. I can't accept this," Mark stammered, tears now flowing freely down his face. "I didn't do it for this. You were hungry." "Exactly," Arthur said, his own eyes misty. "You didn't do it for a reward. You did it because of who you are. And that is the kind of character that cannot be taught in business school. That is the kind of leader I need in my company. The position of logistics manager is yours, Mark. The salary is substantial. The house is a signing bonus. It's not charity. It's an investment in a good man." Mark stood up, shaking. He thought of the cold nights, the fear, the hunger. He thought of Lily. He looked at Arthur Henderson not as a billionaire, but as a man who had been lonely and found a friend. Mark reached out his rough, calloused hand, and Arthur grasped it firmly. "Thank you," Mark whispered. "You saved my life." "No, Mark," Arthur replied. "You restored my faith. That is worth far more than a house." Mark walked out of that building a different man. He wasn't just employed, he was valued. He picked Lily up from school that afternoon, and for the first time in years, his smile reached his eyes. He took her to the park, not the one with the dried-up fountain, but a beautiful one near their new home. As he watched her run through the grass, laughing, he realized that the bread he had cast upon the waters had returned to him, not as food, but as a future. He realized that even in the darkest winter of life, a single seed of kindness can grow a forest of hope. We are coming to the end of Mark's story, and I have a question for you. Do you think that good deeds are always rewarded in this life? Or is the reward simply in knowing you did the right thing? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. The sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold. Mark sat on a bench, watching his daughter play. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sandwich, a fresh one, with thick ham and cheese on bakery bread. He looked to his left, half expecting to see a shivering old man. There was no one there, but the space felt occupied by a memory, a promise. He took a bite, savoring the taste, and then he called out to Lily. "Hey, Bug, want half?" She came running, her pigtails bouncing, and scrambled onto the bench beside him. He broke the sandwich, handing her the bigger piece. She leaned her head on his shoulder, munching happily. Mark wrapped his arm around her, feeling the warmth of the sun and the warmth of his daughter, and he knew deep in his soul that they were going to be okay. He had lost his lunch that day in the city, but he had found his life. If this story touched your heart, if you felt Mark's struggle and his joy, please hit the like button and share this with your friends and family. It helps us so much, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that reminds us of the power of the human spirit. Remember, you never know who you are helping. The stranger in need might just be the angel or the CEO who changes your destiny.